5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. And, that's a quick one. And we are live. Happy to have everyone who's joining. I will give the floor to Richard to do the introductions. And yeah, take it away. I will be in the background if you need me. Have a good panel.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Richard Ward, and I'm kind of a venture altruist. I'm sort of running around helping startups all over the world become successful one way or the other. And I think what we have today is really one of the, for those of us from the Metaverse community, one of the most interesting stories of the last few years that doesn't star somebody named Zuckerberg. And it's the story of Ready Player Me, which previously was Wolf3D. And so, one of our speakers today is Timmu, one of the founders and originators of this entire concept. And we'll let everybody do a full introduction. But also the story of a startup and a founder, it's really kind of like the classic hero's journey. There's always the initiation of the idea. There's maybe not all of your assumptions were right. You kind of walk through the woods, you meet some, it's like Lord of the Rings. You meet some other people in the woods, you figure out which ones are enemies and which ones are friends. And then hopefully at the end, we all end up, in the right place. So along the way, some friends that Timmu met were Herty Tammo, who will also introduce himself, but is with Startup Wise Guys and has been a serial investor and supporter through their incubator program of multiple companies in the kind of the XR metaverse space. And then also Dave Haynes from FOV Ventures, recently launched a fund in the XR space, the metaverse space, but he personally, through previous ventures, has been around for a long time. And so with this, what I'd like to do, simply is, Timmu, if you kind of like introduce yourself, and then also just kind of like basically tell us the story. How did we read all the press releases, we see all the YouTube videos, we see all the crazy stuff. But of course, as with all things, it probably started a little smaller and a little more differently than it is today. So how did it start?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the intro, and happy to be here. So first, Ready Player Me. I'll kind of summarize quickly what we do today and why we think that matters, and then kind of where it started and what was the journey. So Ready Player Me is a cross-game outdoor platform for the metaverse. We see that people spend a lot of time in virtual worlds, and the kind of the metaverse is happening around us. And it's not one game or one app or one experience. It's a network of thousands and millions of different experiences and worlds and so forth. So it makes sense for you to have an avatar that travels with you across many different virtual worlds and is not stuck in one game. So that's kind of the consumer point of view to the problem. And then from a developer's point of view, when you're building a new game or a new virtual world, you need to build an avatar system, a character creator for your game. And building a good one takes 6 months to a few years, even if you want to do it really well. And it's a major pain and a distraction for developers. And with Ready Player Me, we have SDKs and APIs we give to developers that kind of solves all their avatar problems. And we've grown from launch, which is like two and a half years ago, to now 4,000 customers, 4,000 companies using our avatar system in their games. And as a result of that, we can actually easily kind of make the avatars travel across the whole network. So you can buy skins and NFTs and all kinds of stuff for your avatars and use them across the world. And as a developer, you can sell metaverse assets that travel across many thousands of worlds and are not only in your game, which also helps you generate more revenue. So that's kind of what we do today. Why we think that matters is because the metaverse kind of has two paths. One is a more centralized path where we'll end up living in a world controlled by one company that makes all the rules, and that is not a good future. And then there's the other path, which is a more open and decentralized metaverse, which is more like the internet, where you can navigate between different pages, the worlds, and it's all kind of somewhat consistent, and it's a big network. And it's not owned by one company, it's not controlled by one company, it's built by thousands and millions of developers and creators. So that's a good future. And for that future to happen, there need to be standards and protocols and services that kind of link together different virtual worlds and make it easy for people to navigate between them and make it easy for developers to kind of connect themselves to the rest of the metaverse. And that's why we think it's important to build avatars that travel across worlds. Our kind of mission is to break down virtual worlds and help people navigate between worlds. So anyways, that's what we do.
That's where we are today, right?
Yes.
That's like when you take one out of the oven and you say, okay, this is the after, this is what we baked. But how did it all start? I mean, what was day one of the whole Wolf3D Ready Player Me adventure?
Yeah. So day one, first I grew up, played a lot of RuneScape, and it was obvious that kind of virtual worlds are interesting and they have real value, and the assets in there have real value. So I think that was important to understand for me. And then I started messing around with 3D printing, which led to scanning stuff, and eventually that led to scanning people. So we had messed around with like scanning people for 3D printing, and we had that background. And then when Oculus was acquired by Facebook, it kind of became clear for us, or we thought, that VR is going to happen, and VR is going to be social, and avatars are going to play an important role in VR. And that's why we really decided to kind of pivot or start an avatar company. We started from building hardware. So we had those hardware scanners, like a studio at first, and then we built those like photo booths that Dave visited in Italian airport 6 or 7 years ago. And then we collected a big database of scans. And from those scans, we eventually figured out how to build a deep learning solution that didn't require any hardware. So take a single photo and convert that into different styles of avatars. And then we built that into like an SDK that developers could use to create personal avatars. And we started selling that SDK to big gaming companies like Tencent and Huawei and HTC and also like Vodafone, Verizon, H&M, lots of big enterprise customers. And what they needed was not only the SDK that made personal avatars, but the entire avatar system around that. So like bodies and hair and animations and all the tech around the avatars. And we kind of ended up custom building those things. And that was our business for like 3 or 4 years. And we were cash flow positive. It was decent. There was a service component to that. It felt like we have something that people actually need. But it wasn't scalable. It wasn't scalable to hundreds of millions of revenue. It was like a service-driven thing, like licensing to enterprise, painful. So eventually, we decided to drop that business, raise a smaller seed round, and build Ready Player Me as a platform, which is free to use to developers to start, and which is kind of an end-to-end solution that anyone can integrate with their games. And we launched it on the kind of first, second month of the pandemic or lockdowns, and then it really took off immediately because we had built, so many avatar systems from scratch ourselves. We really understood what it takes to build one. We really understood the problems developers are having, like what kind of developers are having them. So when we built Ready Player Me, it was like after 6 years of, chewing glass and staring at into the abyss or whatever the saying is, and having done it for a long time. So yeah, we knew what to build, and we became experts in what is now very valuable in that time where nobody really understood that it's going to be valuable. And that's kind of a good strategy as a young founder where you know nothing about nothing and you don't have any execution experience. So it's better to take a market risk than to take execution risk in that sense. That's what we did with avatars.
And so actually at that point, Herty, is that when you guys met each other, or how did you actually meet?
I think it was our business school, Estonian business school founder called me and said that those are the guys, we really love them, we would like to support them, would you also take them to the program? And we got introduced. We studied in same business school, but on age-wise there was a little gap, and we didn't know personally before.
And so then, was it this the time that you were launching Startup Wise Guys, or was this already an established program?
We were already like 3 years in. We already had some experience, but still very early days for us as well.
Okay. And so now, Timmu, you did join one of the Startup Wise Guys sort of incubator cohorts, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and like. Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead. I mean, how was that? I mean, was it, by the way, I always like people like, what was like the things where, when you go in, you always think one thing, and when you come out, you tend to usually have a slightly different view on the world. What would be the big compare and contrast for you on entering and exiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when we started, like, I hadn't seen a VC even from like afar, so it was like, we knew nothing about nothing. Like we were from a small city with like 40,000 people trying to like build something cool. But we didn't know anything about like how startups are built. Like we didn't even like call ourselves a startup necessarily. Like we were like, okay, we're building this thing, like it's cool, like whatever. But we realized that we would really benefit from like the basics of like how things are built and what's the right mindset and how to speak with investors and how to, I don't know, like all this stuff that is like kind of like out there already that people have already learned and experimented, all the frameworks and stuff like that, to be kind of a little bit more methodological with building things. I remember I used that word very often when I was in the batch as well. So it was like we wanted to figure out like if there's like things we can learn from the industry that we can apply to our business. So, and like just not do things completely randomly. And that was why we joined, and that's what we learned as well. Like we got all the kind of basic frameworks of how you think about the product, how you think about product market fit, how to speak with the investors. We got a network from two of the first investors that also encouraged us to move to the States. So I actually moved to LA right after the pandemic, which was very helpful. And like that's kind of like that was our experience. And we were also we were kind of exploring different areas of the product and different kind of directions. So it was a good time to kind of like basically like refocus the team on a new target essentially.
Well, so let me throw it back to you, Herty. So you meet these kids, they've got an idea, they've got 6 years worth of traction in an area they've decided to abandon and then kind of take a pivot and those sorts of things.
That was a little bit earlier. That was it was like 2 years in maybe.
So
maybe
when
1 year in.
Them for joining, like let's say the incubator, what was it about what they were doing that attracted you, and what were the things that you kind of like really thought, hey guys, if you don't fix these couple of things, it may be a problem?
I think we were attracted to the founders because the product that they were doing first was not something we could figure that it will go really big, but we really liked the founders and their resilience. And in our industry, there is saying that A-class founders will fix the B-class product, and the B-class founders will fuck up with the A-class product as well. It means was our bet for the founders, and it has worked out very nicely so far.
Excellent. Well, and actually,
we can still mess it up.
Well, actually, that's a good question. So, what's the biggest thing that you kind of like thought was going to work, but it didn't? It screwed up.
Us?
Yeah.
I mean, everything. I mean, I think honestly, like, maybe that's something that is like more useful for people is for the first whatever X years, we like thought that it's like we're gonna have this vision and we're gonna fucking make it happen, and the world is gonna work like we want because like we want it to work like that, and like we didn't really try to understand like reality and what makes sense. It was like reality distortion feel like just push it through and like it'll work out, So that was not a very good strategy. So we actually we changed we kind of eventually, after failing with several things, we realized, okay, like we need to learn from the mistakes we're making all the time. So and then we were like we kind of worked our mindset, I guess, and then like became more methodological with all the mistakes we were making, and then we were actually building a new product every year. We learned a lot from each of those things. We kind of like understood where the world is going a little bit better. Like it was more obvious that avatars were needed with every year. But I can bring examples of things we thought would work that didn't work as well. But the main thing that I think is useful for people is that like you should be trying to understand what reality is over this whole time. So an example where I didn't understand the reality and then eventually figured it out, and that was really the biggest unlock was, we were, after the hardware, we were trying to kind of become like an avatar tech company. I would say like, we're going to have the best avatar tech that kind of predicts avatars from a selfie, and we're going to build face tracking, and we're going to build all the best technologies that developers can use, and we're going to have this avatar suite of products. And it's all like based on data science. So like we were like a team of 15 to 20 people or something, and we were mostly data scientists on the development side. And we were like, okay, we're gonna do avatar science. Well, last time I checked, I'm not a scientist, and I'm the CEO of the company. Okay, so like if I don't understand deeply, I am not the top player in the world in that, like in science, in deep tech companies. Like you have to know what you're doing. we're not going to be good at that ever. And the reality I didn't understand was, like, that's not my strength. Like, why am I playing on something? Why am I building a product around something that I'm not good at? Like, what we are good at actually is building product, building developer tools, building like things that work and are like great products and solve problems for people, not science, right? Like, not data science and figuring out the highest end kind of coolest out technologies. Like, we're not the best at that, and we don't want to be best at that. And that learning of like how after years of really trying to be the kind of like the avatar tech platform, whatever, that was like the beginning of the pivot to Ready PM EET, because it's like, okay, this actually doesn't make sense. Like, I'm never going to be the best at this because I'm not, like, this is not my strength.
Right.
But my strength is building product, so like we should build a product, we should like build something that I'm good at. And then that's where it was like, okay, like what could that be? Like, what could be the platform? And like the idea was always to have like a database of avatars that people can tap into and use in multiple different games. So like that idea is always like was there, but then we actually figured out a solution that we are actually good at. We're good at building, and that is like very scalable, and that is a good solution for the world, for developers and so forth. So anyway, so I would say, just understand your strengths and weaknesses, and then you can learn from the kind of different directions you're taking. And that was an example of one where we spent too much time on going in a direction where we couldn't possibly win.
Well, so one of my favorite cartoons or memes is the one where it's like, what people think success looks like. It looks like a straight line. What it really looks like is like, a line where you kind of like keep going backwards and forwards, and you fail a couple of times, and finally you magically end up at one, at the success point at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, where I often come back to this sort of Lord of the Rings analogy, where it's like it wasn't just one person doing everything. It truly was, at different points in time, different people with strengths and weaknesses, because we're all human, came into the story and helped overcome the different challenges at different points along the story, right? And so, I think that for me, that provides a very good analogy of this thing. These things are journeys, not necessarily, reaching a final destination and those kinds of things. And, and so along that, so I understand that there's a slightly amusing story about you and Dave on the fact that there was an early version of your relationship and then a later one. So Dave, when did you first meet Timmu?
Yeah, hey guys. So I was looking back at my emails today, my email archives, and realized that it was probably somewhere in kind of March or April 2016. So it is. I really feel like Ready PM EET, kind of, to a lot of people, it seems like an overnight success, but actually it's been, literally 6 years of very hard work. And yeah, I guess the funny story was, so I was working at a fund called Camp, which has also got a bit bigger nowadays. And we were one of the funds that was kind of actively investing in Estonia. So we had invested in TransferWise and GrabCAD and a few other Estonian companies. So, and we always went out there, and Startup Wise Guys was a perfect partner to kind of, make a base and try and meet some of these companies. And so actually on my way out, I remember being quite hungover after a good night out in Estonia and going through Tallinn airport. And I'd met Timmu and Casper the day before, and they were like, right, well, you've got to try this thing. And so I had myself scanned in the kind of the egg machine that they had. Really great scan. It must be somewhere live on Sketchfab. I'd love to see how bad I look in that particular twin of myself.
3D hangover picture.
And then it's funny, I was looking back at my emails, and there's, a dialogue between myself and Casper pretty much from that point until January 2017, which was the first time that I passed on the investment opportunity. And, again, like, you kind of, as investors, you build this anti-portfolio, these companies that you missed out on, and it really felt like Ready PM EET was one of those. And it was funny, in his last sentence, Casper signs off by, thanks for the feedback, but we're going to work really hard to prove you wrong. I think that really sums this team up, because they've done, such a lesson for founders, like, that resilience to go and build something is incredible. And then, flip to 2021, as Timmu was doing a great job of putting his Series A together, it had completely flipped, where it was me kind of, effectively begging Timmu, saying, hey, we'd love to put 100K into this round and stuff like that. So yes, I think that the takeout there is, if you are a founder on this journey, it's like, just to kind of be as resilient as this team was. And it's kind of, sometimes you get the right product, but you haven't hit the market timing. Sometimes you get the product running, you need to iterate. But if great investors should invest in great teams. And that was probably my mistake. I saw a great team, but I had underestimated the product because it didn't quite fit the market at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
what did you think about Dave when he was saying we'll pass? You guys, what was the feeling then?
I mean, it made him one of like 140 in that round. So it wasn't like it would have been surprising if he didn't pass. So yeah, I mean, the early rounds were definitely not very easy to close. Like it was always like 6 months to 9 months to like and lots of times with like very short runway, and almost dying. But the last rounds have been a little bit easier. But I would say like on the point of being resilient, it's like, it depends on what's your kind of default mode. I think like, first, like, would I recommend someone to go to that, the 9-year journey? Like, I definitely enjoyed it, but I'm not sure if it's like for everyone. So it just takes a lot of, it's like very impractical for most of that time. It's just like it makes no sense until like it kind of like works out. And like it is a strategy to be early with something that is obviously valuable, and then become experts in something, and then like the market happens and you win. But does the market happen? Like when does it happen? Like do you still have the energy then to go and take the market? Are you going to build the right solution by then? I think like what really was important for us was like to keep rebuilding everything. Like we just kept rebuilding everything like every year. We built consumer avatar apps ourselves. We did the enterprise stuff obviously for like a longer time, but inside that we always try to find the next thing to like scales better and it's more standardized and whatever. It's like we just keep reinventing things all the time, and then the reps of doing that and learning from those things, that eventually like made it possible to build Ready PM EET. But in a lot of other cases, like if you have like a CRM for whatever, and it just doesn't work, and you just keep doing the same product, and raising the 18th seed round to like work a little bit more on with your like so like, and then is the world moving towards kind of like you existing or not? That's the good question. Like for us, it was very obvious. Every year that went by, people are going to spend more time in virtual worlds. Like avatars are going to, like Apple avatars came out, like all the mobile companies were starting to think about avatars. Like we saw success with the enterprise kind of like SDK sales. We saw the whole like market was going in our direction. So it was like so incredibly obvious for us that it's going to be important. It wasn't obvious if we can build a solution to like win in that market, but it was so obvious the market is going in that direction every year. So it was easier for us to be resilient because we saw things are moving in the right direction. But if you don't have a like a product that like benefits from a timing like that, or then like I see a lot of people in Estonia that are like very resilient, but they are like they should like fucking quit, they should quit and do something else. So it like I don't know if it's universal advice. Essentially, that's what I'm saying.
Well, no, that's interesting. So I'm going to kind of like, we're kind of getting into the last sort of like couple of minutes of this thing. I'm going to change it around a little. So here's the question, right? So let's assume, let's assume Ready Player Me is the universal platform for avatar type system, right? And it's, let's say, and it's a couple of years in the future, and you're some kid, you come out of school, or you're tired of your job, and you quit, and this, that, or the other, and you assume Ready Player Me is infrastructure. Right? Mm-hmm. What company would you build if you were coming out of school and it was going to be, you would assume Ready Player Me was infrastructure? What would you build, Timmu?
Oh, interesting. So what will I build in the Ready Player Me ecosystem effectively?
Yeah, basically, if you were to say, hey, look, I assume this is like infrastructure. It's kind of like, Snapchat filters, right? Those are part of the infrastructure now. Here's a company or an idea that I would go build, assuming Ready Player Me is infrastructure.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could start from understanding the Ready Player Me community very well and seeing like what are the things that are not there yet that like the Ready Player Me community would benefit from. So there's A lot of people using avatars in all kinds of different ways. Maybe they need a sticker app. Maybe they want to use the same avatar, that they use in VR chat in the stickers in chat. And maybe you build that sticker app, and then, you can acquire a bunch of people from the Ready Player Me community, and you can, sell some skins and stuff like that. That's one way to think about it. I think the virtual fashion space generally is interesting, and we're planning to open up everything so anyone can take part of the virtual economy and sell stuff in the metaverse and make it usable across thousands of games to Ready Player Me. So building a virtual fashion brand could be a good business if that's your strength. If you can tell a great story and build a cool brand and, kind of make people desire your stuff. It depends on your own strengths again as well. Are you good at building product? Are you good at building brands? Are you good at what you're good at? I think that's actually the first thing to think about. And then, but yeah, our goal is to be the infrastructure and open up everything. So anyone can build an app using our avatars. Obviously, that's already the case. Anyone can sell virtual accessories and items and take part of the Ready Player Me community and whatever other ways that will be in the future.
Cool. So Dave, let me throw this question to you. I mean, if on the two sides, number one, are you seeing any companies, any startups that are saying, hey, we're assuming stuff like Ready Player Me is done. Now we're building the next things on top of that. And number two, if not, what, you decide you're tired of this whole VC thing, blah, blah, blah. You're going to finally go build something, but it's going to be on this infrastructure. What would you do?
Yeah, so things on top, I think there is just so much to do on top of the Ready Player Me ecosystem, and it actually makes me smile because it feels like every week I get pitched by a company who is using Ready Player Me. So that's always a kind of, a great kind of tick when I'm getting pitched by a company. But we've been looking at we continue looking at the tools and infrastructure layer. It's I think we're kind of, year 6 on what is a kind of 20-year technology shift, from Web 2 to where we are now, whether you call it Web 3 or Metaverse. So we do think about timing. Timmu already said it. We've been pitched, and we've actually made 2 investments in companies in the virtual fashion space. So once everybody has an avatar, then it's right, I want to look good. There's been slightly more niche things. I was pitched by a virtual tattoo company last week and a virtual makeup company. Maybe they're slightly too niche at the moment, but who knows? We've also invested in companies like Move.ai, which are thinking about how do you translate human movement into your avatar? So they do markerless motion capture. But then we've also invested in kind of end user platforms. So we're just about to make an investment in a company that is thinking about how to bring people together around their love of esports. So can you actually represent that into kind of virtual stadiums and things like that? So I think as the metaverse matures, what we're looking for is, we get pitched by a lot of people making generic metaverse builders. It's here's a place, we're the WordPress of the metaverse. But what we're looking for is kind of more, what are the specific things that bring people together in the space? What's that activity? What's that hook or that kind of simple game loop, whether it's social or pure gaming, that bring people together? And then if I was doing something, I would be thinking about where VR is going. I think that's still an untapped space. And as we've crossed the kind of 10 million user threshold, there's some ideas that, I got pitched 5 years ago that just wouldn't have worked with the market penetration. But it's that interesting place where it's not big enough that all of the big companies have come in, but it's not small enough that there's no revenue. And I would love to just some simple productivity apps, more social stuff. I think there is maybe a kind of 18-month window where some really talented entrepreneurs could build some big businesses.
Well, Herty, how about you? The same thing. If you were going to quit this whole crazy VC incubator thing and go launch something based on infrastructure like Ready Player Me, what would you do? And by the way, the flip side is, are you seeing kind of startups coming to you with this sort of assumption, right? Hey, we're going to do X, on top of that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, I also see very many companies using Ready Player Me, but I wouldn't like to quit investing into great founders. I would like to build the founder product on top of Ready Player Me. It means we are doing founder club, for example, where we matchmake people before they start companies, build the teams, validate the ideas. And I would love to do this online using Ready Player Me.
So actually, that's an interesting question. Could you imagine? Because I know that like Startup Wise Guys has got like a SaaS group and like a sustainability technology group. Would you ever see something like a Ready Player Me incubator team? I mean, all these companies that they say, look, here's the assumption.
Good idea, Timmu. Let's do it.
By the way, we'll
just do it.
Tell you the secrets.
What happened with my camera?
We can see you.
Oh yeah, is it very
closer?
I don't know.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, might be a good idea. Let's think about it.
I think on that, I mean, you look at other key infrastructure companies, people like Twilio. Twilio had a Twilio fund. Slack had their Slack fund. I could imagine the Ready Player Me fund being a thing.
Excellent. Yeah. You heard it here first, folks. You know that we did it here first. So. With that, I'd like to, we kind of been at time. I'd like to thank everybody. So first of all, I'd like to thank Timmu for telling us, the human journey, right? I mean, I do think it's that classic thing of it's an overnight success, 30 years in the making type of thing, and that there's all sorts of twists and turns in these stories. It's never as straightforward as the most recent press release, right? And, I'd also like to thank Herty for, taking that long view on these kinds of journeys. Finding these teams with these great ideas, but realizing that maybe some changes needed to be made, and what they really need is kind of a support and community to, as Timmu said, hey, we didn't know anything about like how do you structure certain things and how do you run certain things, and then finally I'd like to thank Dave, who certainly is out there finding great teams and helping them also provide the guidance and quite honestly the capital they need. Because, as my father used to tell me, he'd say, look, you always hear everybody say time is money, but money's also time, right? That's how you convert these two things across each other. And so anyway, thank you, everybody. And hopefully maybe we'll do this all again. And, who knows, maybe we'll do it all in the metaverse.
Yes. Let's see what we build in the next 10 years.
Yeah.